is John Salhavy. I'm in the Northeast region, Sunrise Trail chapter, and I'm doing a lot of work with 3D printing, LiDAR scanning, custom painting, custom decals, and come to the conclusion that when you're a model railroader, sometimes you have to draw. And what do I mean by draw? So, what can't you get? Anybody, what is that one engine piece of equipment, something that you can't get? What is your desire that you can't get from anywhere? Anybody want to? Yes, sir.
Case steam tractor.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other piece of equipment? Okay, so this is the question to think about, that one, why you have to draw. Because there's going to be always that one item that you can't get. But if you use tools such as SketchUp, LiDAR scanning, 3D printing, you can get exactly what you want. So I'm just going to go over the agenda for this evening. We're going to talk about deciding when to 3D print. When are you going to get to that point where I can't get what I want, I need it, I have to 3D print it? We're going to talk about researching the model. We're going to go through the process of building a locomotive from scratch. And actually have on the table there the evolution of a model, how we got from building the basic shapes and refining it, and more refining it to an actual shell. So we're going to go through the evolution. We're going to talk about prep, paint, and glue when you have your 3D printed model, lessons learned from the MP36 project, and then we have some surprises tonight, which only a few people know about. Introduction of a new veterans military unit that I just completed. I think you're going to like this one. And then, I know it's a little late, but in Long Island we shot an Amtrak 50th anniversary video, all different eras, all different equipment. So I think you're going to like that. So, moving along. The MP36. Anybody seen these? Anybody from Chicago? You've seen these all the time? Yep. Something I wanted for a while. I know Atlas just announced it. I was midway through the project when this happened. But the lesson was that
a GE?
It's Wabtec, which actually just bought out GE Transportation Systems. These came out probably about 15, 20 years ago, mostly in the Chicago area. They're also in Maryland, Boston, Utah, a few other places. But yes, I wanted this one. I had the 3D print, especially with the Rock Island Heritage Unit and the Hiawatha, Milwaukee Road. So I had to have one. And yes, that was speaking to it. But the lesson is very important for anyone, because if you are going to 3D print from scratch an entire locomotive, the lessons that I went through to get what I did will be very important. Okay, so once again, the MP36 project was done before the Atlas announcement. The only previous run of the MP36 was for True Line Trains, which was defunct in probably about 2013, I think it was. But Atlas is only producing 6 paint schemes of the MP36, so if you want Mark, VRE, Metro State of Illinois, Caltrain, Go Trains, NMRA, all those others, or you model O-scale, which I know the O-scale people were quite vocal that they were left out from the MP36. So if you want that, there is a model that I will be showing in a little bit, will be public domain. So feel free to download it, print it out, paint it whatever you want. You know, Sunrail has a variant that's in Florida, Tri-Rail, also out near Miami. They have the new Brookville locomotive. So there are a lot of shapes like this, so it is a valuable model to have, and it's valuable skills to have to know how to take one of these models and repurpose it for whatever you want. Okay. So what can't you buy? I know one gentleman talked about the tractor. Commuter engines in cars, still a very underrepresented segment of model railroading. I mean, it's getting better, but there's so many rebuilds and variants with commuter equipment. It's you know, not exactly a big market. So yeah, you may have to 3D print. Transit equipment. Anybody model transit? Anybody do? How about traction? Trolleys, subways. Very good. Yeah. A lot of things you can do with that. Maintenance of way equipment. So many different ones out there. Wreck rebuilds, that's a big one. Anybody have any of those favorite? I know Bowser just came out with the hammerheads. Wreck rebuilds, they'll take an EMD and Alco, patch it together, throw it on the road, make it run. Demonstrator units, a couple of strange things out there. Unique structures, large structures. So I'm just looking at the hockey arena out there. That might be something you may want to 3D print if you need 40 wall panels to set them to run. And you can build a large structure that you can glue together. Historical landmarks, the station in your hometown. You want that station? You can go out and LiDAR it and have it on your layout. Automobiles. Anybody ever want to model their first car? Anybody want to model their first car in front of a train because you hated it so much? Me too. Okay, so researching the model. Excellent place to start. Builder's drawings. There's a lot of them available. Historical Society documents. If you talk to a Railroad Historical Society, they may have some blueprints for you with scale dimensions that you can use to do your drawing from. Rail museums. Went to the Seashore Trolley Museum in Maine, scanned a ton of Boston trolley equipment. Once you scan it, you have it in there, you can get some really detailed information from the model. You're not sitting there with a tape measure and graph paper, modeling or measuring every window. You know, you do that, you'll have it there for a while to work from. Online forums. You know, you can talk to a lot of railroad employees will tell you what color, what the dimensions were, how big something was, any of the details. It's a great source of information. People took a lot of photos when they were working on the railroad. You can look at existing models to make models if you're doing a kit batch. So let's say you are doing a wreck rebuild, you can look at your existing engines that were spliced together. Reference photos. This is sort of a trick when getting dimensions. What you do is if you know, let's say there's a commuter station in your town, right? And you can't obviously measure the locomotive going through. If you know that, let's just say the bank building across the street was 100 feet, and you look at that locomotive in perspective and you can see that it fits within the space, okay, you're gonna get a general idea of how big that model really is. The height. If you think about the bank building across the street, the height of the door for the average human being, now that locomotive is almost sort of into the second floor of the building. You can use those sort of photos and you can get dimensions that way. And always, very important with 3D printing, do not forget this. Remember to convert your real world dimensions to millimeters in scale. You can use scale converting websites, there's tons of them out there. Don't draw it in the full scale because your 3D printer will go nuts if you try to put an 80-foot locomotive in your 3D printer. You're going to just burning up plastic and electricity for probably about a month. What about LiDAR? Great technology. So what we're looking at here is a LiDAR scan of a Boston Blue Line subway car. And you can see how it was a 3D model, and this was shot at the Seashore Trolley Museum in Maine. Because I have these dimensions of this model, I can go and measure any point on that model. Any point. I just go to my phone, I just, at a start and end point, it'll give me the dimensions. And now I have it forever. So I just need to convert those dimensions from the LiDAR scan to the 3D model. Unfortunately, and this is available on the iPhone 12 Pro, 13 Pro, and the newest iPads. The Android, I don't know if it's going to be available. I don't know if there's a standalone device, but right now, that's your best source for having LiDAR scans. You cannot import a LiDAR scan to your 3D printer, and I say the word yet because still relatively new technology, has only been around for about a year. I think eventually you're going to see a day where the resolution will be high enough that you can just drop it right into a 3D printer. Okay, so this is SketchUp software that I use, and this is how you go from a flat drawing into a 3D printed object. So you can see using the, So you can see how here it's like a solid, right? So this is not just a flat image. You can see there's some dimension to it. So this was drawn with lines according to the dimensions that came off the LiDAR scan. So if this, this window here was probably about, I'm going to say about 4 feet in real life. So that was converted to millimeters in HO scale. So that was able to draw that. And then when you print, you can see how it printed this nose piece. So this just came from basically a bunch of lines and dots working over to an actual model. So building from scratch. Okay, so Trimble's SketchUp software is still the easiest and most powerful software to use and learn. There's dozens of YouTube videos on that. You just follow along. You'll learn it. The push-pull tool is the one that you're going to use the most. And what that does is it converts 2D lines to 3D extruded shapes. Basically turns lines into solids. Now you have to be aware of flat shapes versus solids. Because a flat shape, a 3D printer is not going to know what to do with it. So it has to be 3 dimensions. It has to be a solid. And as a general rule, solids are often white and flats are gray. Not exactly always the case, but most of the time, if you draw something and it's gray, it's probably a flat. If you draw something and it's white, it's a solid. You have to be aware of leaks, which are shapes that are not entirely solid, and 3D printers won't print them right. Now this is a big one. Complex curves cannot be extruded. So if you draw something, if anybody knows the MP36, how many curves there are in that nose, or think of any equipment with a lot of curves in the nose, you need to use additional tools. And it's called Fredo Tools Curve-Aloft. And if you follow it through, you can get about 80% of the curve. And the 20% that's missing, you're going to have to draw a zigzag lattice, which I'll show you some pictures of in a little bit. So now you draw one side of your engine. So how do you make the other side exact? Very simple. You start on one side, you make a copy of it, and then you use the flip along tool. So then it will flip it, and then you'll make an exact copy, splice the 2 halves together. Another thing very important. You can actually draw details into the body of your locomotive. So let's say you have a door, right? So you want to draw this door? You can draw that door, and then you can use the push-pull tool to imprint it into the model. So if you do something like a -0.5 millimeter, now that detail is drawn in there. You're not having to sit there and cut that out manually. So that's another very powerful tool. This was the nose cone. The MP36 nose cone.
This is SketchUp software?
This is in SketchUp, correct. Yeah, you can, and this did the opposite. It made the solids red and white for some odd reason, but I can't explain. But you can see the complex curves here. You see how this, and then you have this curve here, and the roof. You see these complex curves. This is where the big problem was. So for like a straight GP38, you're probably not going to run into this. But for traction equipment, where you have curved roofs, you're going to run into this. So you have to use that Curve-Aloft tool. If you try to do this, it's just going to stop, right? But if you use that Curve-Aloft tool, you're going to fill in these pieces, and then you just have to draw the lattice in there to blend it into the rest of the body. So I'm going to pass around some samples of the nose cone. Let's see, and then we'll take a look at the actual model. So if you want to just pass these around, you can see the evolution.
Do you have numbers on them or something?
I'm going to go over the evolution in a second, but I'm just kind of passing them around here. If you want to just pass these around, you can see what the actual nose cone looks like. And then, so you can take a closer look and see what was involved in this and how the evolution, which we're going to go through in a second here.
Now, are these practices the same that would be used for resin printing, or is there a little bit of difference to it?
The only difference between this and a resin printer is that the resin printer prints upside down. Okay. So gravity is working with you on a resin printer, where on a filament printer, gravity is actually working against you.
Did you
have an internal structure being printed?
Yes, you can see the supports were removed from that, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. Okay, so there's a close-up shot of the lattice, so you can see the lines. So you have to draw this in to make a solid sort of a splice or weld, if you will, between the two. And this is the drawn-on detail. You can see the door. So rather than having to hand cut that door, you would just draw this line here and then use the push-pull tool, and that will actually extrude the door into the side. Now we talked about, oh yes, sir.
So the free version of SketchUp will not import STL files. Do you communicate with the Fredo thing via SKP?
Okay, this is done from, you're drawing from scratch and then you use Fredo. You're not really importing an STL file. There really wouldn't be a reason where you would import an STL file because it's going to give you thousands of lines. This is more for when you're building basic shapes to put together to make a you know, whatever component you want to do. The window struts. I brought this to everybody's attention because if you see how this structure was sort of built up, and this is very important with 3D printing, and I'll tell you why. 3D printers, if they don't have the right supports in certain places, the model will collapse. And I've seen a photo out there, I don't know who took it, where somebody attempted this one time, and the whole locomotive looked like somebody put a giant fist through it because it just collapsed. So what the workaround for this is you put these large, thick struts in there, and this basically holds up, holds up the thing. The printer will build underneath it, and then you'll have these struts that'll build up to the roof, and that's what keeps the thing in, in good shape, keeps it from collapsing. So the evolution of the model. So these are the pieces that I'm passing around right now. This was the first attempt. You can see it's kind of angled. You can see up here in the where the window struts, they didn't go all the way, so it caused a big gap in the middle of it. The second variation made it a little wider, tried to fix out some of the angles, still looking, kind of boxy, really not exactly looking like the MP36. At this point now you can see we're getting better. This is the beginning of using the Fredo tools, where before those were just angles. This is a leak, by the way. If you can see the hole in the model, what happened in this case was something in the model and the drawing was not a complete solid, which caused a leak, which the printer fills in as a hole.
John,
Yes?
how did you get the windshield struts to go all the way to the roof?
Okay, if you look back at that photo I had, you see they were like underneath there, so they're underneath and then underneath the roof itself. So basically you're building a triangle. So part of the triangle is covered where the other half is exposed, and that's how it did that. Okay. So moving along, now you can see now we're getting into a really good model of the MP36. And you can see the rounded edges here. You can see how this was filled in. All these complex curves, we're getting to the point where it's really starting to look like the MP36. And then this is the one where I extruded the doors. And then finally, the MP36 itself. So there it is. And this was printed in 2 halves at the back and the nose cone and glued together. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this one around, and you can go ahead and take a look how all the detail parts were done. You can see the imprinted details, the drawings in there. Take a look at it, and if you have any questions, I'm just going to pass that around while I have my water break, and then we'll continue.
What kind of printer are you using?
I'm using the Dremel 3D printers, and I really like them because they are super reliable, and they work right out of the box. I mean, these things are bulletproof. You know, you're not doing the as much configuration with them as you're doing with some of the other brands. They're made for safety. They're actually made for schools. They have safety interlocks that you don't have to really worry about fire. They don't draw a lot of electricity. So when you turn one of these things on, that lights in your house don't blink. You know, they're just super reliable.
Were you gonna use a Kato motor underbody?
It fits the Athearn, but that's a surprise for later.
Okay.
Yeah.
That one fits after the.
That fits the Athearn AMD 103. It's just gonna need some, we just have to trim the back a little bit off the AMD 103, but that one will fit on there. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
What layer size did you use?
0.8, but the body itself is 1 millimeter for the entire body. And for the imprints and the details, that was half a millimeter.
You said you printed it as two halves and then you glued it together?
Yes, the
Why don't you
nose
print it just as a single model?
wouldn't fit in my 3D printer. Yeah.
Gotcha.
If you have the larger 3D printers, and I know a lot of the resin 3D printers now, you have those, and you can print in one model. They also have the infinity printers now, which works like a conveyor belt. So then you'll just continue to keep printing whatever length. That's why they call it the infinity printer. Those are brand new. I've never actually seen one in use, but the concept sounds solid. So I think something you're going to see a lot more of going forward. Yes, sir, Rob.
You mentioned earlier on that you don't drop the LiDAR scan right into the printer software. How do you make the transition from the LiDAR scan to actual printing?
You're using the LiDAR scan to get the dimensions, and you can also trace certain things, but it's really the fact that you're going to get the exact dimensions and you can keep referring back to it as often as you have to. Yes?
So do you typically do two screens then? One with the LiDAR image on it and one with SketchUp?
No, what I do is I have the LiDAR on my phone. So if I'm going to refer to a detail on that, I just go in there and do the measurements, and then I go into any scale website and just type in so if, just to give you an example, let's say this headlight here was in real life 2 feet, so I would type that in and it would give me the dimensions back in HO scale or millimeters.
What LiDAR program are you using?
Scaniverse?
Scaniverse?
Yes. And anybody have any further questions before we continue? Okay. And then, yeah, just a few more details on the model that's being passed around. And someone mentioned about the internal structure. Yes, you can see where the supports were removed. So this is very light material. It's like an accordion almost. So you basically just take a pair of pliers and you just give it a good tug. And the
You
supports.
didn't use two filament.
What's that?
You didn't use two filament. Did you?
So, no, just
Some people use.
yeah. Some people
Filament
draw
to
their own
resolve it
lattice.
out.
Yeah, they draw their own lattice. In this case, it was just easier to let the computer do the work.
Okay.
And I just said, just use a pair of pliers and gave it a good tug, and it just popped right off.
Yeah.
How long did it take to print that long piece?
Long piece, 13 hours, and the nose about 4. And we'll go into this in a bit, but the nose piece has supports everywhere. The back piece had supports everywhere. The nose piece had only where needed. When this was done with only where needed, it was done without everywhere. Sorry, it was done where needed. When the back piece was done where needed, it collapsed. There is a trial and error with this, and I'd like to tell you get everything on the first try. That's not the case. You're going to be doing a number of variations. So in this case, it was 6 variations before the nose cone was ready. But once you get familiar with your equipment and you're familiar with your drawing methods, even the one with the leak, that was very easy to go in there and find, because then you can look at it and just zoom in carefully. You can find the leak. There are also websites, just type in fixed STL,
Yeah,
There's
they call it
websites.
being watertight.
Yeah, watertight, that's the term. Yeah, the term watertight, meaning that it's an entire solid. So prep glue and paint, just a few things. So you're gonna clear out the support filler inside the model. You definitely wanna trim any wisps, hairs, or other plastic before you prime and paint. The best glue I found is the Bob Smith Industries Mid-Cure 15-minute epoxy, works very well. You want to prime it with the Stymylres primer. It's a resin-based primer sold by Badger Airbrush, and it smooths out the body of the 3D print. There's a little rough material in there, but it smooths it out, and then it makes a nice smooth surface for painting. And then I use the Vallejo Air Acrylic to paint on that, and it's a great, comes out with a great finish.
Who makes that primer?
Badger Airbrush.
Okay.
It's called Stymylres. STYNYLREZ. So lessons learned from the model. So there isn't a lot of work in the complex curves. You're going to find you're doing it and redoing it, and a lot of redoing it. But you'll, once you get it right, it'll look just really good. The large pieces need more supports when 3D printing to prevent a collapse. In your SketchUp program, you want to beware of stray lines, because stray lines make things do some odd stuff when it's printed. And even the other thing to watch out, you go ahead and draw something and there's a stray line there, the shape might just attach itself to the stray line. Now something is off, and you'll see some unusual results. Another point here, it's very easy to attach a line to the wrong shape. So you really have to zoom in, especially if you're doing those lattices which join the curve loft pieces together. If you draw one to the wrong side, now you're gonna get a dent in it. So if you were drawing let's say you're drawing here, from this line to this line, but you miss and you go from here to there, now you're gonna have a dent. And then you gotta go through it and undo it and clear it all out and rebuild it again. So it's something to watch out for. And the other thing, draw on details should be molded to at least 0.5 millimeter. That seems to be a really good depth. 1/4 is too light, you really can't see it too well. 0.5 millimeter, you're gonna get some nice drawn in details if you go even deeper. So. Okay, that's the end of the 3D printing portion of the show. So, hey, Rob.
Is there a panic button or a stop button in case you see something going?
Yes, just most printers you just stop and then you can stop it right there. Yes.
Yeah, I gotta ask a question.
Absolutely.
Sounds dumb, I'm sure.
No, not at all.
You were talking earlier about solids. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, to me, a solid means that there's no space in between. Am I thinking the same thing, or?
Yes. Well, it's solid versus flat. Okay.
Okay.
So if you're drawing a triangle, you just draw a rectangle. It's a flat. You extrude it or make a cube, it's a solid. So
It adds thickness.
It adds thickness, exactly. So you're not doing flat. So you got to, because the 3D printer flat, it's not going to know what to do with it. So you have to have. If you think back to the drawing I did with the subway car. Okay, if you looked at that subway car, you could tell there was a thickness to it. It was that was a solid versus a flat, because the original drawing.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah, the original drawing was a flat, and then you get converted into a solid. Yes.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand the communication between SketchUp and the Fredo Curve tool. Do you save it and export it and take it?
No, what you do is you download the Fredo tool, and then there's a number of steps that, okay, if you draw the flat, like a curve, then you apply the Fredo tool, and it converts it into a solid with those complex curves in it. Actually, let me do the Fredo tool is a plug-in.
I think he's asking,
Yeah.
is it a plug-in to the?
Yeah, it's a plug-in, yeah. Can I just borrow this one a second here? Yeah, I'm just gonna show you where the curve, see, if you look at the model right here, see this curve? And this curve? That's how you had to do, the Fredo tool was the one that made that.
Right, but I didn't realize it was a plug-in, I thought it was a standard.
Yeah, it's a plug-in. See, this was done without
Right.
the Fredo tool. See the angles in it? And it doesn't look as round. That's what the Fredo tool does. So I'm just gonna tell everybody what we just demonstrated. If you look at one of the earlier models, you can see that this was entirely very angular versus the curves that were in the final version of the MP36. That's when you use that Fredo tools plug-in, and that's how you make the difference, and that's how you make those curves.
Some 3D modeling program, one I have, did a lot.
It does. Which program are you using?
The Libre,
Which one?
Libre,
Okay, no, I've never heard of it. I'll take a look into that. Yeah, that's good that it has
it's
it.
$100-something.
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
still
that-
cheap compared to
Yeah.
other.
I also think that there's another firm, FreeCAD, I think also has that.
It does? Okay, yeah, there may be a lot of different ones. SketchUp is the one I use, but there may be a lot of different tools, so whatever, you find works best, and almost all programs export STL files, so you're never gonna, you're never gonna be in a bind to get into your 3D printer. Okay. Alright, so, just gonna do something, have a couple surprises in store for everybody tonight. Yeah.
You and Oprah.
Yeah, what's that? So, actually, Rob, you turn the lights back down. If any of you are part of these groups, please stand and be recognized. As soon as the video loads. So if anyone is active or reserve military, please stand and be recognized. If anyone's a veteran, please stand and be recognized. If anyone's in a military family or veteran family, please stand and be recognized. If anyone's a military or veteran caregiver, please stand and be recognized. Okay, let's have a round of applause for everyone here. Thank you for your service. Thank you for all you do.
Go Navy.
And yes, that engine is with us tonight. So we will, as soon as the video is over, we'll go ahead and take a look at it.
Is there a prototype for it?
No. Anybody see Maverick?
Yeah.
F-14 Tomcat? We'll bring the lights on, so we're gonna go ahead and bring out the prototype. So it is here tonight. And there it is. So it was based off the F-14 Tomcat with the skull wings and the Navy logo. So it is available for pictures. Anybody that wants to take a picture of it, we're just going to do one more surprise, and then anybody can come up and take a picture with it. So I said, for all those, this engine is for you. So thank you for your service. And one more surprise for tonight. Gonna turn up the volume a little bit. So that was Amtrak's 50th anniversary. So we had a lot of fun filming that. A lot of headaches, but keeping that turbo liner on the track was a nightmare. But that's it. So just want to open the floor to questions, and we want to talk about, anything that we did tonight. Yes.
You said you're gonna be releasing this on Thingiverse?
Yes.
Or your other models that you have?
Yes, the MP36 is on Thingiverse right now. And
Okay.
if you search under Alchemist Railroad, I don't know if you got a handout. It's on the handout. I can
No, I did not get it.
Yeah, here, I'll give you one. Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can go ahead and download this today if you want.
All right, thank you, sir.
It is on Thingiverse, so yeah, everybody who wants, feel free to download it. You can make as many as you want, remix them, enjoy it. Oh, sure.
Is an MP36 a hand-fired or a stoker?
I'm thinking electronics that didn't work initially, but.
And still only work about 50% of the time?
Really? Yeah. I've only seen that one in Maryland. That's the only time I've ever seen
So the
one.
whole thing's on Thingiverse, the whole thing in how many, 15 hours?
Was that
The whole thing
to
is,
print about 15 hours? Yeah. Hi. Yes.
Thank you. I'm wondering what type of filament you recommend for high temperatures.
Yeah, I just use the PLA because that's what the Dremel primarily uses. I like the PLA because you don't really have to worry about the fumes, where some of the other ones you have some concerns about fumes as well. But the PLA, yeah, and that's Dremel's default. And what's great about that is that everything that Dremel has works together, so you're really not having to do any guesswork. You just turn it on and it runs right out of the box.
what's the diameter of the phone?
PLA, polylactic acid.
Not the exact diameter, but it's their default brand, so you're using Dremel. It's the same Dremel as the tools that you use. I don't know the exact diameter, unfortunately. Yes.
What do you use for supports when you build a model?
In your slicer software, it automatically generates the supports, so you can draw your own lattice if you want, but most of the time, if you just use the default supports that the system generates, it works fine.
Does the system like lay down the support first and then build a model?
Yes. It builds it up in layers, and a lot of times you'll see when you have the outside shell, you'll see like a zigzag built underneath it, and that's building up the supports as it goes along. One thing I don't really do a lot of is using the everywhere function on the supports, because sometimes you'll get supports in windows that you don't need. Now you have to go through there and cut them out and some of them will snap off very easily, some of them, yeah, you'll need your Dremel tool to get some of those things out, yeah. So, it's a lot of trial and error, it really is.
Do you have a problem with warping, like particularly your long section there, did that warp on you at all?
As long as you put a raft, it doesn't. Yeah, if you don't use the raft, you'll warp.
Okay.
Yeah, the raft, it's worth it to spend the extra time on the raft, yes.
And so you cut that out when you're done?
Yeah, the raft, it just snaps right off the raft, yeah.
The long unit for the engine back unit, did you print it like this, or did you think about printing it like this on end?
It would fall. It would
Even
fall
with the
down.
brim?
What's that?
With a brim around the face?
Yeah, the shaking of the printer would probably knock it over.
Okay.
Yeah, no, as far as getting the supports out to print it up, so the, right side up, you just really need to take a pair of needle nose pliers and snap them right off, I mean, you have to do some trimming, but.
Yeah.
Yes?
There was a question about higher temperature plastics, and the usual answer to that is print with ABS, but my experience with ABS is if you don't have a hood, don't even try.
Yes,
Thermal
correct.
expansion is so bad.
Yes. The other thing I don't like about ABS is that it's drawing a lot of current in your house, and some of the quality in the ABS nozzles and components have been known to catch fire. Yeah.
You can do with styrene too, high index styrene.
Yeah, actually,
I haven't tried it,
the
but
other one I like.
I got a kilo of it.
The other one I like actually is the nylon. I have some equipment made from Shapeways. That's the nylon. I actually like that. What I'm curious to know is what the temperatures on nylon would be. The resin has sort of a similar issue. I mean, the resin, you do get better quality prints. You have gravity working with you than against you. The resin has the same issue with the fumes, though. I mean, you almost have to print it outside at night. That would be the safest way to do it.
What I've heard is the cleanup is.
Yes, yeah, because once it hits daylight, it turns solid. So that's why you have to print it outside at night.
You go through a lot of alcohol with the washing bath.
Yes, you really got to watch that because while it is, the sun comes up and you forget about it, you've got, basically the equivalent of a Dairy Queen dip top in your, in your printer there. Anyone else? Okay, thank you all for coming. Had a lot of fun, so I really appreciate it. If anybody wants any pictures of the of anything that's here, feel free to go up and take a look. Yes. You can cut louvers into it, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just use the tool. The Flex 30. Yeah, the Flex 30.